And now that we're recording, we're ready to start. So we have 105 participants. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to everyone. I'm Fabio Picinic, instructional designer at the FAO Learning Academy, and I will be your host and moderator of today. So I would like to greet you all and welcome to this session on monitoring and sustainable financing for forest and landscape restoration. Also on behalf of Cristina Petracchi, the leader of the FAO Learning Academy, who couldn't be with us today. So if you have attended some of our previous webinars, you already know that this session belongs to the joint series that we organized together with the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, with Future Food Institute, who strongly supports us with promotion, and with the French Training and Research Alliance for Agriculture, Food, Environment, and Global Health, known as Agreenium. So the idea behind of our joint webinars, I'm sure you attended some other forestry session we had in the past, is that to promote the thematic areas covered in our multilingual e-learning courses that are available in our platform and that remain available to everyone completely free of charge as a global public good. So I would like to invite you all after this session to have a look at the offering of the FAO Learning Academy. Therefore, I will come back to that later on during the Q&A session that will last for about 20 minutes. After the presentation of today's speakers, I will provide you with a series of links of all the e-learning courses that are related to today's topic of forest and landscape restoration. So please also keep in mind, this is something that is normally asked during our webinars, that these webinars do not really foresee a certificate of participation. So you can obtain a digital badge if you take one of the related e-learning courses that will be presented today, and we will pass the links, as I said. So if you pass the evaluation of these e-learning courses with a score of 70% of IGER, you will be awarded a digital badge that you can share also on social media and that you can keep track on your curriculum. So once again, the list of all related courses will be shared later on, also in the chat box, and you will see that on the screen. So one last technical information. If you have any questions, I will say that also during the poll, but if you have questions, so you can write your question for the speakers in the Q&A box that you can see in the navigation bar. So if you look at your screen, you will see that there is a Q&A box below. Once you click there, you can enter your questions for today's speakers, while you can use the chat box if you need to communicate with me, Giorgio, or with Giampaolo. So we are supporting behind the scenes. As we won't have time to answer to all the questions from the Q&A, all question and answer will be included in a document that will also be uploaded in the dedicated webpage of this webinar. So I will share the link to the webpage as far as we go on with today's schedule. So the webinar is also being recorded. So also the link to the recording that we will upload on YouTube will be made available with you, also the thank you email that we're sending afterwards. So for the time being, I would just like to wish you an excellent webinar. And I actually pass the floor to Christophe Bezassier, FAO Forestry Officer, who is currently coordinating the forest and landscape restoration initiative. So dealing, this presentation will deal with the e-learning course entitled Introduction to Forest and Landscape Restoration. So Christophe, over to you. You can also start sharing your screen if you can, and I will.
Can you see my screen?
Yes. Can you just change the display settings from?
I am trying.
If you click on display settings, it's the bottom in the middle.
I don't have it now. I have it a few minutes ago.
I can see it's next to the show taskbar button. So it's just, there is a display settings and slideshow.
No, close, not this one, the closest one.
Yeah, just on the right.
On the right, move the mouse
cursor. Right, otherwise, you can just start resharing and making sure that you select the right screen, because normally when you have more than one screen, this is what we see.
Is it okay now?
No, I can still see the notes version of your presentation.
It's strange because a few minutes ago it was okay, and I don't have the option now.
Can you start sharing
yeah,
again?
now I have it.
Okay.
Okay.
Because I just stopped you from sharing. So if you start sharing the right one.
Perfect. Sorry for the delay.
But we're not seeing the presentation now, so you have to share your screen.
Sorry, but where are you? Share again. My presentation is not on the screen. Okay. Can you share it again? Because I don't have seen my presentation now. It was working during the test.
You just have to click on share screen. It's the button below, because at the moment we are not seeing anything. There's just a gallery view with, okay, now you're sharing the screen and it's correct. So you just have to click on presentation mode. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. I will turn off my video now. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry for the delay. Good afternoon. Good morning, everyone. Sorry for the technical issue. So I am Christophe Bezassier, coordinator of the Forest and Landscape Restoration Mechanism. And before presenting to you one of the e-learning course we launched recently in 2021, I will just give you a few information on what is the Forest and Landscape Restoration Mechanism and what we are doing. We are a mechanism established in 2014 to help countries to meet their ambitious pledge to restore degraded land. We are providing support through knowledge management, innovative financing, resource mobilization, FLR monitoring, communication. We are working in partnership with other institutions that support FLR through several regional or global initiatives, such as WRI, and René is one of the speakers today and is from WRI, and we are working with them on monitoring in particular. And our mechanism is also co-leading the task force on best practices in the context of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, started and launched in June 2021 for the next decade. We are doing a lot of things at country level. We have a lot of projects, but today I just want to focus on our efforts in terms of knowledge products recently developed by us on FLR. We are organizing regularly some webinars, training in English, in French, on FLR, on forest genetic resources monitoring. We recently released some publications. I encourage you to read the UNASILVA 252. This is a FAO journal for the forestry division. And we released a special issue on restoration in 2021. It's available in French, English, Spanish. We are managing 3 communities of practices with more than 2,500 members. We have a website, well-documented, newsletters, videos, photo galleries. And we released this year 3 e-learning courses that will be presented today to you to give you the flavor of the content. One is an introduction to forest and landscape restoration. One is on sustainable financing of forest and landscape restoration to be presented by my colleague Mathilde Evans. And the last one is on monitoring forest and landscape restoration to be presented by René Samorsat from WRI. Those courses are currently available in English, in French, and the FAO e-Learning Academy. And we are trying to develop the Spanish and maybe the Russian version soon. Okay, I am jumping now in the introduction to FLR course. Few maybe key facts and figures on FLR. We have around 2 billion hectares of degraded land worldwide suitable for forest and landscape restoration. And it is estimated that 3.2 billion people globally are impacted by land degradation. More than 700 million hectares of forest and land could be restored only in Africa. And it is estimated that $9 trillion in terms of net benefits could be provided if we are restoring 350 million hectares. This is current commitment of the Bonn Challenge by 2030, and the New York Declaration on Forest. All those data are coming from a report from the Global Partnership on FLR, published in 2018. Maybe a few information on what is forest and landscape restoration, and you will find much more information, of course, and detailed information in the course if you decided to take it. First, FLR is an active process that tries to bring people together to identify, negotiate, and implement practices that restore an agreed optimal balance of the ecological, social, economic benefits of forests and trees within a broader pattern of land use. What does it mean? It's the official definition available also on the GPFLR website. It means that we are not only talking about planting trees. FLR is a broader concept. Forest and landscape restoration is providing multiple benefits in a specific landscape. You can have benefits in terms of stabilization of soils, drinking water supply, carbon storage, biodiversity, food and security and nutrition, wood and non-wood forest product, or recreation and ecotourism. We have also multiple options of forest and landscape restoration. It's not only one type of activity. It can be done and that through assisted natural regeneration, for example, in the slope, tree plantation of local species, tree crops mixed with field crops, agroforestry, improved management of forest and landscape restoration, natural regeneration in buffer zones of natural parks, etc. So the restoration activities are relatively diverse, and you need to choose the most relevant one depending on the situation of your landscape. There is a growing mobilization for forest landscape restoration worldwide with the global commitments. We have a Bonn Challenge. You probably heard about this Bonn Challenge, 350 million hectares by 2030. A New York Declaration on Forest. Restoration is mentioned in the Sustainable Development Goals. And we have now a UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration launched in June 2021, co-led by UNEP and FAO. There is regional initiatives in different regions. There is the initiative 20 by 20 in Latin America, the African initiative IFR 100. There is an Agadir commitment for the Mediterranean region. For Central Asia, we have also an initiative by 2030, 30 million hectares by 2030, and Asia Pacific dynamic. The Rio Convention, most of them are mentioning restoration as an option to achieve the target of the Rio Conventions with the UNFCCC, the UNCCD, and the LDN targets, and the framework post-2020 for the CBD. And of course, each country have national commitments. In Africa, you have a lot of countries with national targets and pledges between 2 and 5 million hectares by 2030. And this is also the same in Latin America and other regions. The course named Introduction to Forest and Landscape Restoration is structured, as you can see on this slide, with several packages, with the idea to present concept, approaches, and tools in use at FAO, but also globally with other partners to implement the overall process of forest and landscape restoration. I will not give a description in detail of all the packages, but just I give you the title. So there is one package in the course on evidence-based participatory planning. It's very important to plan properly your restoration efforts. Planning at landscape level with participatory approach with land users. You need also to plan the resources you want to invest. And my colleague Mathilde will talk more in detail about finance for restoration. You need to manage the drivers of degradation. If it's not relevant to restore a landscape if you are not addressing the drivers of degradation. So there is some recommendation in the course on that. Then you have some packages of in terms of techniques to restore with particular detailed information on assisting natural regeneration, direct seedling and tree planting. And the last package is on monitoring and long-term management of restored sites. And in addition, with few information in this introduction on monitoring, we have decided to develop a specific course on monitoring to be presented by my colleague René Samoussa. Just to give you the situation, this course was recently launched in June 2021 in English and only in October in French. We already have more than 1,000 people participants and using the course online directly, and or they download direct on the website, with a good balance between Africa, Europe, and Asia, and less people in South America. It's why we are trying to develop a Spanish version. The participants or the users of the course are coming from multiple organizations: government, international, individual, private sector, university, non-government NGOs. So it means that the course is of interest for multiple stakeholders, and it's also a good balance by gender, with almost more than almost 60%, almost 40% with female attending this course. Thank you for your attention. I give now maybe the floor directly to my colleague Mathilde, who will present to you the finance modules or courses that are very interesting. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Christophe. Good morning, good evening. Oops. I hope you can see my screen. Yeah, you can see my screen. Okay, so yeah, good evening, good morning, everybody. We're gonna talk about money because Christophe really planted very well what we mean when we talk about forest and landscape restoration and all the activity that need to happen when you want to actually implement forest and landscape restoration. But to do this, we need some funding. And so our team developed 3 e-learning courses linked to financing. And the purpose of this presentation tonight is to, or today, wherever you are, is to present to you what's a little bit what is in this course with some teasers, so that you really get excited about taking the course and knowing more about financing for forest and landscape restoration. As Christophe said, the size of the challenge is humongous. We are talking about over 2 billion hectares of degraded land that need to be restored, and the funding that you need to do that are also really impressive. If you look at the land degradation neutrality target between 2015 and 2030, there is a 2 billion hectare target, and this means $318 billion per year. So we're really talking about a lot of money if we want to do that. And if we want to do that, all the different stakeholders really need to get together. So what are the main funding sources for FLR? Actually, you have a lot of different sources of funding, and we usually go to the one we know. Oh yeah, it will be climate finance. It's kind of straightforward, or development cooperation. But let's try to think about all the different possible sources of funding, because you do have private sector that is quite involved, non-governmental funding, environmental funds, state budget and resources. It's really something that is really worth looking into, as well as non-traditional funding that is really coming up with crowdfunding, for example, or green bank cards. So all these different sources of funding needs to be used together in a good way in order to enable long-term sustainable FLR financing. Indeed, the different investors in FLR are not looking for the same thing. If you look at the graph at the bottom of the page, you can see, depending on the degradation level of your landscape, and the cost of restoration is really increasing. The more degraded your landscape is, the more expensive it will be, and the more risky it will be to actually invest in the landscape. And you can see that the investors are not the same all along this graph. When the landscape is really degraded, you will look at NGO and public funding that will actually give some grants to start restoring the landscape. Well, actually, when your landscape is more restored already, you can think about more traditional investor and looking at markets. So we really need all the different type of sources that we can get, and we need to make them work together all along the journey of restoration. As Christophe presented, when we talk about forest and landscape restoration, we really talk about a landscape, a mosaic of land uses and financing needs. You have a lot of different things that you can do. You can protect primary forests, you can do some sustainable agriculture, sustainable livestock. Actually, you need to do all these different things in different parts of the landscape, doing an integrated plan, what should happen where, and then support all the different pieces of the puzzle so that the puzzle works well together. So all the different pieces have different needs in terms of finance. And actually, even if you take one piece, let's say you want to work on restoring a part of the forest, then all along the restoration journey, you have different activity that needs to be financed. And this activity can be financed by different sources. For example, when you start and you say, okay, I want to protect. So what do you need to do? You need to zone. So that's the type of activity. Then you restore. So you need to provide material to restore, to improve the land, providing some more seeds. And then you want to diversify, to take out all the burden that there is on one piece of land and trying to develop alternative livelihoods. So we'll work on business development. So you have other financing needs. So it's really important to think, okay, when you think about the landscape and the restoration, you have a lot of different financing needs and a lot of different financing possibilities. And what's important is to match them. So in order to think about what are these investment needs, we try to classify them so that it's a little bit easier for us to understand what they are and how they can be financed. So we saw that there were like two main investment needs. There is the institutional and policy, there is the enabling investment, that lays the institutional and policy foundation for FLR investment. So what are these enabling investments? It's about stakeholder engagement. It's about legal and regulatory framework, incentive mechanism. So it's all the background work. And then you have the asset investment, which are actually the direct investment in physical component of the landscape. So here we're talking about building green infrastructure, more efficient agro-processing, etc. Really direct investment. So you have these two types of different investment, and in the e-learning you will learn much more about them and how you can actually, what type of financing are appropriate for these different type of investment. We also look at what are the different type of financing mechanism. And actually, when we did the study, I think it was really interesting because we don't think, when we think about FLR, we often think about grants. And actually, there are a lot of things that are available to us. They are what we call all the different suite of financial mechanism. And these are, they provide funds for FLR activity at different stages of the FLR process. And they cover the transaction cost and the scaling up. They can be either for profit, and you think about loans, short-term or medium, equity investment, insurance or guarantee, or not for profit, such as public finance or grants. So that these are the financial mechanism. And you also have all the market mechanism, which actually use economic drivers to create a market incentive for investment for FLR. So the market mechanism are payment for ecosystem services, market development, sustainability standard, etc. In the e-learning, we go through each of these different mechanisms and give some examples. And the example are structured as what I'm going to present now, just for insurance and guarantee, this one, but in the course, you will have all the details and in the publication as well. So what are insurance and guarantee, for example? They are mechanisms to de-risk restoration investment and provide security for the investors. One of the case study that we're presenting is the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, MIGA, and Ecoplanet Bamboo. Ecoplanet Bamboo restore lands in countries that are politically unstable. So MIGA de-risk the investment. It means that they reassure the investor if there is a political issue their investment will be refunded. And that's really a great way of supporting investment. We look at the success factor, at the challenges, and the different type of investors. So you will have all the detail for each of the different case study in the publication and in the e-learning. So just as a reminder, you will go look at all the financial mechanism and the market mechanism. So what are the lessons learned that we got from looking at all these mechanisms and how they can work together? What is really important, I think I mentioned it several times, is we need to coordinate finance to maximize result, because when we will meet the diverse stakeholder need, we'll spread the burden of investment risk, and we'll leverage adequate finance over time and over landscape, over all the different activity of the landscape. The other really important lesson is like, should we coordinate finance simultaneously or sequentially? The answer is that you can actually do both, and both are really interesting. And when you think about financing, you should think about exactly how it's going to work, because either you could say, okay, I'm going to provide microcredit for nursery development as well as public incentive for restoration. So if they are public incentive, people will want to restore and they will have the plants that are available thanks to the nursery. Or you can do sequentially, because first you do a planning for restoration options, and then you do the microcredit, and then you support private company. So you can think about the two and actually mix and match the different options. Another thing that is really important is this notion of building partnership of people that are within the same stakeholder group. How, for example, farmer can get together inside producer organization, and how they relate with other stakeholders to work together to build a plan for the landscape, how the landscape can work together. The thing is, we develop very often this very nice integrated natural resources plan, but there is no financing plan to back them up. So basically, they're a nice plan that cannot be implemented because there is not a landscape financing strategy. And I will really insist that this is one of the key pieces of any project. So the other key lessons are, it's really important to develop business model. Definitely, the public sector will not make it by itself. We need to have more private sector investments into forest and landscape restoration, and the importance of local ownership and local champions cannot be stressed enough. So this course on finance, actually we have 3 different courses. They have been launched in April in English and in September in French. The same amount of people, more or less, have been taken, like for Christophe, the course online, almost 700 people online, and over 500 downloaded it. What we did now is to extend the reach and really support implementation. I mean, we should not just do e-learning and that's it. So please, take the course and then reach out to us so that we can work with you, maybe in your project, how to develop a better financing mechanism and support you on that. So it's not just a course, but it's actually something that is applied. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you. And I will give the floor to my colleague who will be talking to you about the last e-learning course, but not the least, the one on monitoring, making sure that actually we are having results in the field.
Thank you, Matilde. And I will start sharing my presentation. I will focus on monitoring, as Christophe and Matilde mentioned. One of the key elements for making sure we are making progress is to monitor, and that's also part of the finance. In order to achieve the impacts that we want when we invest, we would like to measure, how we make progress, and that's all about this course. This was developed by FAO in collaboration with WRI and other experts that were part also on the process. Just wanna see, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. Yeah, so this you all know this because Christophe and Matilde also mentioned that, but one of the key aspects that I want to mention here is, we have all these regional initiatives. Now we have the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, and all these commitments are based on hectares. Hectares is like the measure that the political commitments have used, to promote, because it's an easy way to understand. But as we all know, restoration is more complex than just the hectares. It's not about just planting trees, as other colleagues have mentioned here. There are other ecosystems that are not necessarily mean planting trees, like restoring wetlands, for example. So the hectares, in terms of monitoring, it's a difficult way to assess. It's a simplification that you can understand easily, but it's difficult. So that's one of the challenges we have on monitoring. The other one is we have, as you can see here, different levels to monitor. There are countries that want to monitor country commitments, or there are regional entities like European Union or the CCAD, SICA in Central America, that would like to measure regional from several countries. There are other, that we are looking into landscapes, like let's say a watershed, that we have this landscape, and that's another level. And then we have projects, we have farms, we have plots.
Hi, Fabio. I think we're experiencing a problem.
Yes, I think we lost Rene. Let's just wait for maybe 1 minute for him to come back. Maybe he had some connectivity issue from the place where he's connected. Unfortunately, these are things that can happen during webinars. Let's just wait for a minute or two, and he will be back. Just bear with us a couple minutes. Can you perhaps, do you have a phone number to get back to him to try to see whether he can connect promptly? Oh, he is back. Okay, good. Hi, Rene, we see you now, but you're muted. We lost you for a minute.
Okay, apologize for that. I lost internet here.
It can happen.
You're back. When you know how this virtual world works. But thank you very much. And I don't want to take more time, but we have this course, and I hope you see the screen now. We have a monitoring, and the reason, the complexity of this, is we don't do monitoring, we don't do restoration just because carbon sequestration, for example. That's one of the objectives, but you have many objectives, as you can see here, that are jobs, food security, resilience, and you have many ways to do this, and there are not, one way, or we can exclude one way. For example, we have reforestation with native species that we would like to promote more, mixed arrangements, but we need more research to understand how this can help. We have natural forests that we need to protect. All of these require different techniques for monitoring. And what we have in general terms is we have a lot of knowledge on biophysical aspects. We can measure trees, but we know that this is not just about trees. And that's why when you take the course, you will be taken in different land uses, as you see here, depending on your situation. You can have cropland, grassland, forest, and depending on the land uses that you choose, then you can select different indicators, or you can also start thinking, what are your objectives? Why you are planning to do restoration here, and what are the components that you need to measure? As you see here, this is a way to have a organized conversation and dialogue with different stakeholders, because this is multiple stakeholders, and you can have different parts of the question and then discuss, we want more, let's say, soil management, but that might have an effect in other areas like water. It's all related, and some objectives might conflict with each other. So the important thing is how we also reach an agreement. So it's the monitoring piece, and part of the course is trying to understand that we need to agree on certain points in order to go into the indicators and monitoring part. As you see here, we also need a baseline. If we don't have a baseline, we cannot compare, because we don't know where we go if we don't know where we were. So that's, I think, an important component that it needs to be done. And once you have that, I think important also is to understand what are your indicators, and the indicator for each indicator you select in the different areas, some might be qualitative, some quantitative, but you have to select the baseline, you know, where you are and where you want to go. A simplification of this could be avoiding deforestation. Like you have now 1,000 hectares and you want to increase that protected forest to 2,000 hectares. That's a measurable objective that you need to have, but not all of them are quantitative. There are some that are qualitative, like the socioeconomic ones that are more difficult. One other part is the constraints. So we need to be aware of the constraints, how the different indicators we choose. Of course, we want the best indicator that exists, but sometimes we don't have the data. Sometimes we don't have the resources to collect the information, or even if we have the information right now, we don't have resources to collect that in the future, because this is just one time, but monitoring it's a commitment. You know, you need to measure in several times. You need to continue measuring what you are wanting to measure. One last part of this is some examples of how you can report the data. This is an example of a sustainability index for landscape restoration, which uses the concept of systems, basically landscapes, and then you aggregate all these indicators in one single metric. Like when you go to school, you know, when you have a quiz, you have a grade, no, and it could be 7 out of 10. And then that can tell you something, but if you really want to understand, then you need to go to the specifics. Just you can see here the authors that participating in putting together this program. So we are grateful for that, and I'm a contributor of this also. And if you want to read more, this is also based on research that we have done with FAO. So there is a guidebook that goes into the details if you want more detail on these two things, besides from the course itself. So thank you very much, and back to you, Fabio. And sorry for the internet outage. No problem.
Excellent. So thank you very much, René, Mathilde, and Christophe. Thank you very much for the presentations. Just getting back to some questions that I've been reading through the chat box now. So as some of you asked, the recording as well, all the presentations that have been shared on the screen now will be made available at a dedicated webpage. The link has been repeatedly shared on the screen, on the chat, but I will share it again now during the Q&A session. So we're starting now the Q&A. So please, Gianpaolo, if you can share the screen with the slide. There in the slide, you will see the list of the 3 courses that have been presented today. I will share also now the links, the same links also in the chat box to ease your retrieval of the courses. And I give the floor to Christophe to answer to some of the questions. I saw that there was for sure one question for you, Christophe, so maybe you want to take it directly from your side. It was a question from Terence, or if you notice anything else on the Q&A, please feel free to go ahead.
Oh, yes, thank you. I'm not sure to understand totally 100% the question, but this is what is the position of FAO on monoculture plantations as degraded land or on degraded land. So it's not clear for me the exact purpose of the question, but what is clear is that depending on the landscape, depending on the consensus based on the participatory approach at landscape level between the different land users, it could make sense in some case to plant trees and to plant one specific local species of trees. Monoculture is not always a bad option, but it's not always a good option also. And in a lot of cases, to plant only eucalypt in some area where you can move forward with more biodiversity, building on assisted natural regeneration is probably better. But what I want to say is that we cannot say it's good or not good. The landscape context is very important, and the landscape is normally with people on the landscape, and the planning of restoration activities must be done considering what the people want to do on their landscape. And in specific area of one landscape or in a field of one private farmer or group, it could make sense for them to have monoculture, but there is no rules for that. It's just a process. The principles for restoration are to have a planning with a participatory approach and to really contextualize the restoration option to the need of the people and to the potentiality of the landscape. I'm not sure it's exactly what was expected by Terence, but this is my answer.
Thank you, Christophe. I'm sure that Terence can get back to that maybe in the chat box if he wants to complement. Otherwise, as I said, we will compile this Q&A document in the next days, so you can further complement the answer in case that is needed. I would thank you again. I would move ahead maybe with Mathilde, since there were a couple questions for her, and I see that more are coming for both René and Mathilde. So I'm sure that you are all looking at the questions in the Q&A box, but maybe Mathilde, you can start with the first question you would like to answer to. There was one on the roadmap, for example.
Yeah, thank you very much. Indeed, I look at the different question and maybe I will answer them
Great.
a little bit globally. I think it's really interesting, the question of either a roadmap for financing NGO for FLR. And basically, I think the answer there is if we really want to be successful for FLR, what needs to happen is a process with multiple partners. So I wouldn't say there is a channel for NGO, a channel for non-NGO, a channel for farmers. Basically, what will be very strong is to have a vision for the landscape with a lot of partners, as I say, very diverse partner, working together towards a goal. And I think this will be extremely appealing to donors. So, because for the moment, there are some effort on that. Actually, there are some example in Brazil of this kind of constituency, where you have NGOs and private sector and the public sector that got all together. And I can give you some links to that. And actually, they have been supported by a lot of different donors in order to do restoration. So I think this is important. And you were mentioning, actually, Manuel, also what about the funds that we can set up for restoration? And in Costa Rica, actually, they have been really successful at setting up some national trust fund in order to support forest protection and restoration. So definitely, the national funds are important, and you can really think about how you can build these funds. You can get some money coming from the private sector. I think the one in Costa Rica is the money is coming from a tax on fuel. So that's an idea. You can also have participation from private sector. You can have the green bonds. I saw there was a question about the utility of the green bonds. For the moment, I don't have on the top of my head an example of green bond applied to restoration. They can certainly be applied. We also need to not be completely genuine. For the moment, we don't have a lot of very big or private sector investment in restoration because it's still considered as a risky investment and a long-term investment, which is not always very attractive. And this is why all these other mechanisms, such as the guarantee, are really important to support investment in restoration and reassure investors in restoration. So actually, when you will take the course, you will see all these mechanisms that can be put in place to support private sector investment into your landscape. How can we attract that better? And there was also a question of how you can get support to actually develop restoration plans. So there is a new e-learning that is coming up in a few months exactly about that, but there is a publication that already exists on how do you develop strong business plan on forest related restoration issues. So we'll put the link in the chat box. It's a very good one, and then you can still you can always contact us. You have our contact, and we can put you in touch with some incubators that could maybe help you with that. Thank you very much. I hope I answered some of the questions.
I think you did greatly. Thank you so much, Mathilde. I would move ahead with René, since there are several questions also for René. So maybe René, you can choose two, and then we can close this round of questions, going back again to Christoph, sorry, as I see that there was a last question coming from Martin Christensen on how do we finance commitment for monitoring, how much will it cost, who's the engagement. So sorry, maybe you can just start, René. Also, a small note, I saw that some questions are coming now in the chat box. If you could please, participants, write your questions in the Q&A, it will be easier for our speakers to keep track of the questions. So you can go ahead. Please,
Yeah, no,
René.
thanks, Martin, for the question on how do we finance commitment for monitoring. I think that there are different levels, as I say, on monitoring. You have the global, the national, the local level. At the national level, we have a experience supported by FAO and others on forest monitoring. Of course, we know that landscape restoration is beyond just the forest cover or trees. I mean, and there is a difference between the monitoring the impacts and monitoring performance. And impacts is much more difficult in terms of who is financing. And some countries like El Salvador they have a commitment on that. They have a national restoration plan, and they allocated resources to develop these monitoring systems at the landscape level that then they plan to do at the project level. There are organizations like international organizations like FAO, IUCN, WRI, others that are working at joining efforts on how we can monitor and develop these frameworks as the product of this e-learning course that we just presented. And there are also institutions that are working directly with farmers, and trying to understand what are the indicators that can be applicable, and then also how they can track the progress in their actions that they do in their plots or farms, which is different. This is information they collect for them, and then they use that for management. So there are different levels, but it is true that there is a lack of resources for that, and sometimes people is not putting a lot of attention to this. On the other question that I see is Victor, the restoration. How long should we monitor? Basically, as long as the project lasts, and restoration is long term. So if we really are looking at adaptive management, because things might change, we really need to monitor. Otherwise, we cannot manage that. And so every project needs to allocate some resources to monitoring, and it's important. So thank you, and back to you, Fabio.
Thank you very much, René. So if we want to close this round of questions again with Christoph, I don't know if you agree, Christoph, there was actually a question from Martin Christensen coming later.
Yeah,
I was reading the wrong one before, but it's about landscape restoration and carbon markets.
Yeah, and I have another one, the question on the decade and the need on methodological tools and training. So I will try to address both.
Okay, please go ahead.
No, first concerning the link between forest landscape restoration and the UNFCCC and both mitigation and adaptation to climate change, and particularly in terms of link with the carbon market. It is clear that when you are restoring a landscape, we are providing multiple benefits, as shown on my slide with the landscape and the multiple benefits. Carbon benefits are one of the benefits, but this is not all the time the benefit we want to maximize. When we are trying to plan the restoration activities and when we are making technical choice in one specific landscape, the maximization of carbon storage could be a priority, as shown also on the choice of indicators in the restoration wheel shown by René. Climate change mitigation can be a priority in your restoration activity or initiative. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not the priority. It's more biodiversity, livelihood. So depending on your goal and main goals, you will choose restoration options and techniques that are maximizing the benefits you want to have at landscape level based on the negotiation done by people. So in some case, carbon storage and carbon benefits is an important one. And of course, the more the carbon market will be active with a good price for carbon, and the more these benefits will be an option and an interesting option for restoration project promoters, because the benefits in terms of financial resources will be high, and the investors from the private sector will have probably more appetite to restore if they can demonstrate the impact on the carbon market and for the UNFCCC, the UNFCCC convention. I don't know if it's the answer expected by Martin, but does this investment match the need of restoration? That I think yesterday at the COP26, the restoration is clearly mentioned in the declaration and in the recommendation. So yes, clearly the answer is yes. Restoration is a nature-based solution, providing potentially both adaptation and mitigation benefits, and carbon storage benefits, both in the soil and in the biomass. I just want to add something concerning the knowledge, the need of training, etc., and what can happen in the context of the decade. I just want to mention that I am also the lead of the task force on best practices in the context of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. In this context, we organized before the summer, during the first semester of 2021, a huge online survey, capacity need assessment survey, to have a better idea of what are the needs in terms of training, knowledge, tools that are need to be developed because they are not existing. In the context of this task force, we are now working on a knowledge and learning plan to be prepared by mid-2022, with the idea then to develop maybe some, to try to fill the gaps in terms of capacity at global or regional level, and to identify maybe new knowledge products that should be developed. In the same time, we are trying to facilitate the access to the existing knowledge products. So you have already on the UN Decade website and on the GPFLR and FLRM, our website, a lot of knowledge products. We have a knowledge base, database where you can find and identify with keywords some tools, methods, approaches that could be useful for restoration practitioner. All those knowledge products are accessible on several websites. So I encourage you to join as a community of practice, FLR community of practice. We managed by my colleague Katerina, and she will help you to access to the existing knowledge products on the different websites.
Thank you very much, Christophe, for this comprehensive interventions and answers. I saw that also regarding your first questions, it was an addition coming from Terence directly in the chat. So perhaps we will just include this for the Q&A document so that you can also see it what Terence wrote. I'm sorry, but from the chat box, it's quite easy for our speakers to lose track of everything, since we are writing all the links there, and there is multiple information provided. I also saw that there was a technical problem for one of our attendee, Evelyn. So it seems that you're having a technical issue directly from your end. So if you cannot really access the courses online, which is normally the best solution, since you don't need to really download the full package with all the files, I would send you directly, I will note down your name. You can send me an email with your direct account email, and I will indicate you what is the support contact that you can use for trying to solve this issue. So I will get back to you on that if you write me your email. If you can move to the next slide, Gianpaolo, I would like to close the session of today. We are perfectly on time. And I see that there are still some questions that have not been answered. But as I said before, all the answers will be provided in the Q&A document that we will upload at the link that was shared before. You will also receive a thank you email that will be sent to all of you attendees with the direct link to this page where you will find presentations, video recording as soon as possible, and the Q&A document. So once again, I take this opportunity for thanking all the presenters. So thank you very much, Christophe, Mathilde and René, and also all the other colleagues, Giorgio, Caterina, Gianpaolo, who collaborated today in this session. I would like to thank also our partners, so UNESCAP, Agrinium, Future Field Institutes, who always support us with the promotion of all our sessions that we regularly organize. And I want to thank you, participants, for having attended this session, for the very big number of questions that we saw on the Q&A box. Very interesting to see your questions and good to acknowledge your interest in the topic. So again, we will provide the answers to those that have not been responded now. Thanks again. Here you can see on the upcoming event some information about our upcoming webinar that will take place next week. It's always on the topic of forestry, about national forest inventory capacity. So we will have examples from Liberia and from Guatemala to talk about this topic. I'm sending here in the chat box the link to register to the webinar. And thanks again. So stay tuned for our next sessions, and wishing you a nice evening again, nice day, nice morning. So thanks again to all of you.